We will try to answer the question, can journalism networks help media and investigations under authoritarian regimes? And we will be talking specifically about Turkey. And on my left, you have Stefan Candia, who is the coordinator of European Investigative Collaborations, or what we call EUTurkey. And on my right, he's Craig Shaw. He's the investigations editor of the blacksea.eu. And I'm a reporter at the blacksea.eu. And the blacksea.eu is I don't know why it doesn't show on the... Sorry, yes, so the Backlash.eu is an in-depth investigative online platform, and lately we've been focusing a lot on Turkey and Turkish investigations, and we work as part of the EUTurkey network, so we will be mainly talking about that. And our case study is mostly the Malta files, the most recent investigation we did about Turkey, and it was the first time Turkish media or any media for that sense that showed in such deep extent the financial affairs of the President Erdogan's family, including also the Prime Minister and their family. So it was the first time with documentary evidence that we managed to prove corruption and possible bribery. And so through the EUTurkey network, we work with the EUTurkey network, and these stories were published in 12 European countries, all over Europe, in many languages, and most of the time it was headline news. And the Turkey stories we had were 3 big ones, and one of them was about Erdogan's son-in-law, who's also the energy minister, called Albayrak, his offshore scheme to evade taxes, and how he basically, after he became the minister, passed a law in the parliament to benefit his own company. And Prime Minister Yildirim, who's quite a weak man, but apparently very wealthy, so we managed to prove that his family had offshore wealth worth at least $140 million all around the world, including ships and property. And the last one was the big one we had was the Turkish President Erdogan's family in secret offshore ship deal, which proved that Erdogan was gifted by 2 close business associates and friends a petrol tanker worth $25 million. So this went through his family, of course, not himself. And so these were the stories, and obviously at the beginning there was silence, and then the attacks started. So I will briefly talk about that. Basically, mainstream media, so we published these stories, and then the mainstream media, as you can imagine, did not publish at all. So you had, in Germany, France, Belgium, these big headlines about Erdogan's petrol tanker, Erdogan family's petrol tanker, and in Turkey, this quiet. And it was quite obviously disappointing, but not entirely unexpected that the mainstream media wouldn't publish. But the further disappointment came when the diaspora media also kept its distance and did not want to touch this story, specifically the Erdogan story. And further disappointment came when we have in Turkey what we call the opposition media, or anti-government media or alternative media, which are trying to operate in a very, very contained and small space. And some of them did publish certain aspects of the story, but they published it wrong. They got it from the English version of the story Google translated, and they basically got the stories wrong, even though we published them in Turkish, and we contacted these editors before saying we have this story. But and when we confronted these editors saying, you basically published it wrong, because as you can imagine, it's quite a big deal if the story gets published wrong, because it's at the end your name is on it. And there was no concern. I say, well, it happened, we misunderstood. And this actually showed that there is a dominant bad journalism in Turkey too. So we shouldn't only talk about Turkish journalists being victims, but actually how the basic competencies of journalism is lost. So being scared is obviously quite understandable, but bad journalism can never can never be the result of being scared. Being scared cannot be the excuse for bad journalism, and unfortunately, we encounter this, this a lot. And so I would like to talk about briefly about the backlash. So there was, for a long time, silence, and where you would expect resignations or public outcry in normal countries, that didn't happen. When the opposition party caught up with our stories, which actually came 6 months later, then a public outroar happened, which actually shows you the state of media in Turkey. State of media in Turkey is so weak that basically if politics catches up with your story, then noise is being made. The media cannot make the noise itself anymore. It just does not work like that. And when that happened, so you had the opposition MPs calling this the biggest scandal of Turkey, and then you see on the left the AK Party, the AKP, which is Erdogan's party, a group member in the parliament ripping us our report. And then you have on the right, I specifically put it there because I think they need to be named and shamed. These people who operate under the CNN brand, CNN Turk, basically called us openly that we were part of dark forces and the prosecutors should investigate us, and these are the names, and if there are any Turks here, I think they will be very, very familiar to you. And so they called for prosecutor to basically investigate what we do and what is the Black Sea, and obviously they just couldn't make sense of the website and how we work. And the AKP, the Erdogan's party's the official press release was that the documents we published were fake, and then it was actually the Gülenists who shared the documents with us, which obviously was a lie. We never worked with or contacted by or had any contact with Gülenists, and we would not be in the future. So, so this was the attack at the end, but it's basically it showed how difficult it was to put forward stories, even though, you know, through a network you can basically reach all around Europe. But I want to go back to the competency issue and give my point of view as a reporter working within a network, and especially as a Turkish reporter who's trying to still do investigations and also try to operate in a network which consists of 12 big media, and they're all, you know, big names and very professional and being in the industry for so long. So basically, as a reporter, you have these tools and the support and the expertise that you get from other partners that there's no way as a Turkish reporter you would be able to get in any other way. So networks obviously help disseminate the news faster with a wider context, but it also, I think, helps with these with these basic competencies as well, because being mediocre or getting something wrong or a mistake is really, it's unacceptable if you operate within a network, because basically throughout Malta Files, as we were writing the stories, sharing the drafts, sharing the information, you had, we had 11 other media partners, so which meant that we had at least 11 fact checkers who would call us and say, I think you made a mistake, you know, putting numbers together, can you check? So, and then you go back and check and it's true. So actually messing up or even being mediocre is really, is not an option. So I think for an individual reporter who's trying to operate under an authoritarian regime, and being part of a network could definitely help with these competencies. At least this was my personal experience. And also obviously the expertise and being able to access certain information that there is no way you could access in any other way, because obviously you have these expanding databases, these in, you know, weird countries you have financial information that by yourself you cannot make sense of. And actually it doesn't even have to be weird countries, let's say the Netherlands, because Prime Minister's ships were, a lot of them were registered with the Netherlands, the same with property, and as you know, the Netherlands is known as a tax haven of Europe, and I spent several days trying to get access to financial information from the Dutch authorities, and I was just Google translating things, and it was it took really long time. Then I asked our Dutch partner saying, can you help me? And it took her half an hour to come back with all the information I asked for and more, because she said, oh, here, one of the ships, it costed 30 million and was bought by a mortgage by this bank. Do you know the bank? And I realized that it's actually a public bank. So here you go. In a second, the story was 5 times better because the mortgage was done through a public bank. So these are the small things that actually have big effects on your story. And yeah, I will give the floor to Craig, who will talk a bit more about the structural issues and opportunities that networks provide for Eastern media.
Hello, you can hear me? I'm sorry if I sound a bit strange at any point. I have very bad toothache, and Italy doesn't sell the good drugs to help it, so I've been suffering. So my name is Craig Shaw. I'm a British journalist. I kind of operate in a kind of editorial capacity for the Black Sea regarding its Turkey investigations, mostly, but not only. It's not quite accurate. I mean, Zeynep and I do a lot of the same things, research and write stories. She has a much more local expertise than I do, but I tend to help design the investigations a little bit more. So this is just for the purposes of you guys, it's to provide a distinction. I guess, okay. So the story kind of the Black Sea and being part of cross-border networks kind of goes back to 2013 when I first met Stefan Candea. We had worked together on offshore leaks, which was ICIJ's first big project on tax havens. And I knew Zeynep at this time and I had become interested in Turkey. But there was a big gap within ICIJ because there was no local partner. And we tried a bunch of times to contact Turkish journalists to have them be part of these projects, but there was there's a disconnect there. And I think it happens for kind of a number of reasons. When you start to get interested in Turkey, is people kind of, it's a process that kind of a lot of people went through, correspondence or whatever, but there's a big disconnect between what you are reading in Europe and what you are reading in Turkey. And this kind of creates, like I said, this kind of disconnect between what's happening, and also the kind of great reporting that was happening in Turkey was not getting out of the country. And so in the kind of back in 2013, 2014, I really didn't see my role as being somebody who would research Turkey too much, but just that I would maybe help play a role in connecting journalists within Turkey to journalists outside of Turkey. Not only for personal interest of wanting to read more interesting stories that were in English, because my Turkish is almost non-existent, but because maybe to provide some kind of extra protection. This was kind of around the time that they were again starting to go after media groups. I don't know what the next slide is. So from about 2015, we began working on stories about Turkey kind of slowly. I was a fellow at the Center for Investigative Journalism in London, which essentially paid me a salary to do whatever I wanted, and what I wanted to do was work on Turkey. So I could really kind of give my stories away for free, and what I wanted to do was Turkey. So we had kind of done this for a little while, and we were still struggling to find journalists within Turkey who would kind of collaborate or kind of understood collaborations, which is still happens, I think. But in late 2015, early 2016, European Investigative Collaborations Network was formed by Stefan, and the Black Sea was one of the founding partners. And then by summer 2016, the first project that we worked on was football leagues, which was, for us, the more it was based around a kind of Kazakh-Turkish family who were very very kind of influential in Turkey, and they were behind a lot of these third-party ownership programs. That's the Arif family. And it was clear that there was a huge component missing from the research. And so this was really the first time that we were able to get involved. And early on, I mean, everybody within EIC, the partners, the journalists that all work together are all friends, mostly. They all like each other. But you recognize early on that there's an imbalance between what the priorities are within the group. So for us, it was, even though I felt like we had the research we were doing was important, you kind of have to fight for a voice, because you're fighting against people like Der Spiegel, who's a behemoth of an organization, to be able to kind of be heard and get your point of view across. So this is something we kind of experienced early on, in kind of how to collaborate. And I think that since the latest project that we did, there was a big shift. So over the course of 18 months, we have really been able to implement a kind of process where there are some problems with European media and how it views kind of Eastern European stories. But we have, I think, were able to really affect this and so it's kind of works. It's kind of mutually beneficial. So we get kind of, since like Zeynep said, we don't get coverage in Turkey very well. The European media provide a voice for us, and we in turn kind of provide them with context that they may not otherwise understand. And the recent story, which was about the EUTurkey deal, the 3 billion deal to keep refugees within Turkey, was a kind of interesting because each media partner views it kind of slightly differently. So you have to convince people, well, it's okay to say Turkey is like a military type of state and it might be committing some crimes against refugees, but that's not the whole story. You have to place some blame upon the EU, which is facilitating this. Like Turkey, if anything, is the lesser criminal, morally speaking, at least. So I think that in the last few years we were really able to kind of able to affect the network in a positive way. It's not all, doesn't always work. I mean, there are sometimes some instances where people within the network will come to me to ask questions about Turkey rather than Zeynep. I think that funding, you know, for a non-profit organization like the Black Sea, funding is also kind of an issue. Obviously, most of the money is kind of in Europe, but they are not comfortable giving it to Eastern Europeans directly. So it helps, I think, to have to be connected to these organizations. I think did I talk for 10 minutes? I don't know. Yeah, almost. I just wanted to give an introduction, and I hope that you'll have questions for the next part. But Stefan, who is the coordinator and founder of the European Investigative Collaborations Network, will talk about how these work kind of at the upper level.
Thanks. So, hi, I'm Stefan Candea, I'm Romanian, and I co-founded this European Investigative Collaborations Network together with Der Spiegel, and then we had a number of funding partners. I describe my role as a network guide and not as a coordinator, or not as an editor-in-chief type of role where you tell people what to do. It's not possible with our network. So a little bit about EIC, which is, it started as an informal group of several media partners, so not of individual journalists. Media partners who put together resources, time for their reporters to work on dedicated investigative projects, and whose main idea was to put together in-depth reporting at source, meaning that you don't have necessarily someone from Germany investigating stuff in Romania, but working together with the Romanian who would investigate stuff on the ground. And these are the partners of EIC so far. And you could see here a very different profile of the partners. That is the Black Sea and the Romanian Center for Investigative Journalism are non-profit. Actually, the Black Sea doesn't even have a formal structure. The Romanian Center, it's an NGO, non-profit. And then you have a big magazine like Der Spiegel, but then you have also digital players like Mediapart in France. So it's a very mixed group. And what I wanted to talk a little bit about was the different approach we have, and I think it works better in context of countries like Turkey, which is this guiding of the journalists to collaborate and not pushing down the directions for investigation or the direction to tell the story. I work as a journalist for almost 20 years, and a lot of my work was related to networks on investigative journalism, and a lot of the work was also related to foreign media. And both working with foreign media and both working in context of such cross-border networks, most of the time I've seen the push from usually Western Europe or the US to find out certain type of information or to find out certain angles of the story, the way the editor there viewed the story from his perspective. And we try to do it differently, so that's why I say I'm more of a guide, because then each node or each group of journalists on different countries, they impose their own view of the story and they search their own angles of the story. So nobody tells them, look for this specific thing. Because with these networks you have incredible access and fast access to information. Like Zeynep was mentioning this little example with Netherlands, where you have this colleague who can do research very fast with you. So you have this incredible access to information, but the danger with more centralized networks is that you also push through the system a specific view of the story and of what a story is to start with. Many times I've seen reporters in certain countries, especially in Eastern Europe, that they don't consider some stories for themselves, like, you know, corruption, same corruption stories about political leaders. At some point, local journalists say, okay, we published enough on that, we should also work on something else. But then there is this appetite from foreign desk editors to continue feeding the same story. So I think it's important to leave the journalist choice, the reporter choice, to find the story in the data you are sharing. I see a trend in cross-border networks that it's happening in the last few years, that it's following this business model from the US, I call it Starbucks model, where there is one central model and that can be replicated everywhere. And in these networks, in conjunction with the latest technology advances, pushes these networks towards platform systems, where there is an owner of that platform, there is someone who controls the platform, there is someone who controls the tools and the data, and then the users, the journalists, become sort of the product, because they work through these platforms. They don't have access to download the data, keep a copy of it, and they end up putting a lot of unpaid work being managed by some really highly paid NGO buffers. And I think that's a sort of similar system to feudalism, where you just don't, you just can work the data, but you don't ever own it. So when constructing this new network, this EIC, we discussed a lot about having a different approach, and that is our approach right now. Both when dealing with big data collections, leaks, and tools, and also when dealing with the different reporters finding stories. I think this is not time right now to go into these details, but if you want to know more about the IKE network, we can discuss now. Maybe you have questions, and you can also see some documentation where we describe how we work and how we organize our network. Thanks. Yeah. Let's open for questions, no? So, if there is any question, there is a microphone here.
Hey, hello. Just because I would like, if it's possible, to explain a little bit more about this feudalism model that you see and how it could be different.
Well, so what Zeynep started to give the example of this Malta files investigation, right? And that was done by having access to different data sets. And it is explained on the IKE website what these data sets are. To have access to these data sets, you have to put this data on a tool so people can search it. We do that, but so we built the tool ourselves. The IKE network is using an index and search tool that was produced under free software and open source license. So we didn't buy a proprietary product. So that means also that we can replicate it in the different newsrooms, the clone of that tool. We can, people can have access in a network, on a web browser, or they can have access offline at their own office. And also that the decision of IKE is to give copies of the raw data to the partners. So that means I cannot stop you doing further that investigation if I kick you out to have access from the cloud-based tool, right? That is setting the in a certain way the way the network functions. So people can be critical and open about what they don't like. They can discuss. They are not afraid that if they show that there are problems or they don't agree with something, they're not afraid that they will be kicked out from the collaboration. You know, so they basically have also some rights, not only obligations. Does it respond to your question? I mean, once you start, it's like the debate you have today with Facebook and other big tech giants, right? You have access to their platform. It's a great product that you're using, but you are having for free, so they have to make money. And they make money out of you, out of your data and what you do on their platform. Also, they can kick you out whenever they want because they are a company that you don't have any right. And there is regulation in Europe now coming in with this that will talk a bit about what you can do and what you cannot do as a tech company. I think that journalists and journalist networks don't have this kind of discussions, and they don't see these problems, but they should. And because you're focusing on doing investigative work, so you think you don't have to take care of this kind of logistics or organizational stuff. But when you are blocked or kicked out from a network, then you realize that you should have also think about your rights, not only to give stuff to the network.
Hi, I have two questions. The first one is, are you open for collaboration with outside the Europe journalists? And the second question is, do you cover human rights area in your investigations?
The Black Sea is open for collaboration with anybody, as long as it's a relevant story for the region. The EIC, it's, as the name says, it's a European network. And we tested different ways of working with other networks outside of Europe, instead of growing as a global organization. That's one way we can work, but not to take new members. I mean, not to take members in the organization. The human rights work? Well, you know, we do investigations, so whatever could be a good investigative project relevant for Europe, we would do it. We had a recent story last fall was on the International Criminal Court, and the first prosecutor of the court, Ocampo, and that covered some of these human rights topics. Yeah.
I have a question to you. I want to know if it's possible the news about the 25 million tanker about that the president received, if it was like had a resonance in Turkey, or if it was covered. I mean, if the Turkey journalists like take and speak about this news, or only you and Black Sea do investigation about it.
You mean if the Turkish media
Yeah.
reported it? No, they didn't. So this was the big problem when it was the prime minister's story and the son-in-law. Okay, there was some coverage, however wrong or inaccurate they translated. But when it was about Erdogan, the man himself and his family, nobody published it because. I guess everybody is very scared, and this included the exile media, the diaspora media, the opposition media. So it covered everybody, the scare.
There was one outlet,
Apart from one.
Evrensel, which republished verbatim the whole story with a little title saying, "What does the Erdogan family have to say about this?" And Erdogan is suing him for insulting the president.
Yes.
I don't know what happens. The cases move very, very slowly in Turkey, so I don't know whether they will throw it out. I mean, we made all the evidence available online. So the one small organization that was prepared to publish it was kind of attacked for it. We weren't personally, I mean, by journalists, oddly enough, the biggest attacks came from journalists, but there was some attempts to hack the Black Sea websites and everybody's social media accounts and stuff. I mean, the problem is that I don't know how to say it in a polite way, but I think that not only are journalistic standards falling in Turkey, but the competency level is falling too. Because even when that became a bigger story last November, when the opposition party spoke in Parliament, which is the only space, I guess, that it has some safety for them, about proving that millions had gone to the family members. Even that was kind of all chaotic and misreported, and I tried very hard to contact some of the news outlets to provide them with, to direct them towards the documents that were public, because most of this was kind of public stuff, not all of it, but some of it. And it kind of all got lost in the maelstrom of just bits of truth and surrounded by kind of doughy nonsense. So that is very hard for us as a kind of outsider as well for that story, because we try to remain independent, so we don't have the connections to politicians or people who can push it. But on the other part, the politicians didn't do their job either. They messed up the claims, and then the media re-report when they felt a bit safer to report on it, really kind of dropped the ball as well. So it's not an easy thing it's not a straightforward thing, I think.
I'd just like to ask, have you been doing research and investigations in Turkey itself?
No.
I was in Turkey for a year. I did some stuff, but this was
After.
This was before. So 2016. So I was there during the coup. We did a couple of stories, but then the crackdown got a little bit. It was bad for many years. It got worse. I don't know. I mean, I have a privilege as a British man that maybe I would survive, kind of being able to report there. Although Boris Johnson is my foreign secretary, so probably I wouldn't fare too well. But yeah, I mean, I would.
This was mostly desk work done. Yeah, it wasn't on the ground reporting, as it is a financial story. So,
but the Billions for Borders project, we had people working with us there. So. It's hard to find journalists actually who want to do it.
Very hard.
Hi. So I was a bit late, so maybe I lost it while Zeynep was speaking. How much do you think what you call diaspora media impact on readers? Like, do you think people were previously reading some, let's say alternative media, but from within Turkey that was then shut down, are now moved on new platforms that now are diaspora media, or? Yeah.
I think diaspora media has the big potential to be impactful, but the problem I see with diaspora media, maybe it will change in the future, is the fact that they recycle news, they don't do investigations, they don't go deep into the stories, which is the gap that we identified, and that's the gap we're trying to fill. We're trying to be as ambitious as we can. However, we're also, I guess, part of the diaspora media that is trying to reach people. That's difficult. And then you have the rest of the diaspora, which I would assume have more impact. But this is the thing, I think. But maybe it's because everything is very new, the emergence of the diaspora media, but I think the real impact comes from investigations, and this is what the diaspora media needs to focus on. And this is what I believe 100%, because recycling news is not going to get us anywhere. Yes, so now you would also know the Doğan Media, the big mainstream media group, is sold to an Erdogan associate, etc. So a lot of the news, normal news, we won't get, that's for sure. And surely diaspora media has a role in doing that as well. But the real investigations, nobody's really doing it. Spending months on one story. Yes, maybe it is expensive, it's time consuming, it's very difficult, but this is what we have to do.
I think that there's another point which I thought about as well, is that being part of obviously there are normal benefits of being part of a network, but one of the disadvantages is that from cross-border journalism is very popular among kind of donor circles at the moment. So you can get some money to do a story that's about Turkey and another country. But it sets the bar high, and it means that every story kind of has to be about Erdogan. And I think that the kind of the lower levels, the local reporting is, like municipality investigations, is really being missed, even by us, because we spend a lot of our time working on these kind of big investigations, like projects that go on for months, and there's not really an appetite for the funders outside of Turkey to kind of say, oh well, this is something that you should focus on too. So although there's a benefit, there's also a problem. Because how do you do that?
I think that the funding it's a big issue, because you have the pattern of big donors trying to find big central organizations that can cover the world, and that can also work in Turkey, but they can also work in China, and they work everywhere. And I think that is not the answer in this kind of cases. You need much more sort of modular system, and you need these resources that are spent on paying buffer organization, or buffer staff, and buffer editors somewhere in the US usually, and Western Europe. It's a lot of money, And that money can really create a generation of young journalists who don't need all of them to write about Erdogan, but they can write about different issues or do in-depth research about different issues in Turkey. I mean, it proves the work that Zeynep was doing, that you can find a lot of stuff, you can publish stories, and it proves the work she was doing now recently with Turkish journalists on the ground, that there is work possible that doesn't necessarily land you in jail. Of course, this threat of landing in jail is huge, because who would want to just, work hard to know that the moment the article will be published, it will be a sort of jail sentence without a trial. So that's also a huge threat and pressure.
And also, I will just add one thing that about the funding and all that. I think right now, especially in Europe, I get invited to speak, and I always go with the mindset that I will say something else other than Turkish journalists are victims, because I think it's been enough time that we sit in panels and talk about. I think everybody now knows. I think we need to further this discourse and go one step further and say that, okay, how do we do stories? How do we do investigations? If cross-border is, the hype now, and if it's possible to become part of networks, let's do that. So I think I don't want to say that we got too comfortable talking about the repression in Turkey, because it is very real, but at the same time, I think we need to also produce something alternative, which the best way to do it is, I think, the work itself. So that's why I always try to say something else rather than we're repressed in Turkey. But also with the funding, the funders like to hear the victim stories, the repression, and if you tell this to them, they empathize with you and they really feel your cause. They love the Black Sea and what we do, but when it comes to funding, nobody funds you because it's about Turkey or it's whatever, and they come with many sort of different excuses not to fund you. So obviously there is a hypocrisy here as well. And while Europe being so concerned with what's happening in Turkey, when it comes to supporting in-depth journalism, nobody really wants to do it. So
I think there's also a kind of problem that a lot of the studies that go into kind of how can journalism become sustainable, they are like all the success stories are really kind of in wealthy European countries. We have a lot of friends who from Germany, Netherlands, UK, and those models are not transferable. You can't. Some people pay 5-10 euros. I think in like the Danish pay like 50 or something crazy. You just simply cannot ask Turks to pay like 30 lira a month or 50 lira a month, we operate in several countries, so you have to, how do you find a model that is appropriate for Romanians and is appropriate for Turks and might be appropriate in the future for Bulgarians, for example. So I'm not sure really how much kind of the study is focused on how to make journalism sustainable, investigative journalism sustainable in countries where the people are not so wealthy. So this is a thing that we can't come up with either, because you can't charge because people can't always pay. So you want to keep it free, but then how do you fund it without advertising, which you don't want to do either? So there's a lot of questions and not many answers that we have found anyway.
Is there a microphone?
I work as a correspondent in Turkey. I'm from the Netherlands. And I actually recognize what you say about Turkish journalists not being very eager to work with European journalists. But it's also as soon as they start something that is funded or they get their salary from any European country, they are immediately being accused of, working with Europe and being in this frame of, anti-Erdogan. And so how do you tackle this issue, like very concrete? Because nowadays, talking about investigative journalism, I really understand why, as a Turkish journalist, you really don't want to have that job, because you either end up in prison or you start this online initiative that gets blocked because there are great initiatives that are doing stories on fact-checking and whatever, but it never lasts long. So how do you also encourage like young people in Turkey to start this not very sustainable job with all these, I mean, it's not a...
Yes, I agree. I mean, funding is obviously a big part of that if the money comes from Europe or the big funders. I mean, there is no running away from, you know, you being a Soros accomplice or whatever. There is no really running away from that, and all running away from your website being blocked. And you just, but this is also something, when I say let's further the discourse, let's also further discourse in that way. So we try to come up with solutions, or we try to talk about sustainability in Turkey rather than the repression in Turkey. Does it make sense? And I think that would encourage the young generation or journalism students or junior reporters to actually do the job better. I don't have really, obviously, a concrete answer for you because those are the problems we face as well. But the alternative shouldn't be nobody should fund you. The alternative to, oh, you're like, you're getting money from Soros, shouldn't be done, then we shouldn't get money from anywhere. Or the alternative should be, so how do we then, for example, implement a subscription system in Turkey? You know, there are some experiments going on, but, you know, let's talk about these things apart from talking about politics. But obviously things are so convoluted in Turkey that, I mean, you would appreciate as well that it is very difficult get, you know, a bunch of journalists coming together to talk about that.
I think that I experienced this after the publication of the reports on Erdogan, to try to have a discourse with one of the journalists who was on the CNN program accusing us of terrorism. And I think some of this is kind of coordinated. It's like a deliberate thing to just to muddy the waters, to hurl kind of accusations, because they're not interested in the responses. It's not about having a discussion and saying, well, these documents didn't come from Gulen. You can find them online, and then they find other reasons to obscure, because that's their job. And I think that the problem is that Turkey and its journalists are kind of, I think a lot of the time they lost a sense of what, like, of camaraderie. So for the last 10 years, you had one group of journalists calling the other ones terrorists, and then later somebody else came and called the first ones terrorists, and nobody defended each other. So
I mean, this
I think
isn't new. This is 10 years, and maybe now we talk about it so long, but 10 years ago this was happening when certain group of journalists were calling others terrorists. The camaraderie never happened in Turkish journalism, and that's why we're here. This isn't new. This isn't Erdogan cracking down only. You know, we have to, I mean, the same way the New York Times needs to, you know, question itself, you know, Trump got elected. Did we have any role in that? The same way we need to sit down and certain, actually not even certain, all of us should sit down. What role did we have until we got here? What did we do wrong? Where did we mess up that we're in this shit right now? So I think that needs to be part of the discourse as well.
I think you just have to be transparent as well. If you take money from whoever, you have to be honest about it. I mean, we have boundaries of money we would or wouldn't take, but it's you have to just do it anyway, because you have to just live with the, I mean, the slurs, and just do a better job than they do, I think. And hopefully you get some support, because, I mean, we didn't yet, but maybe eventually people will figure out it's better to defend each other.
Yeah, maybe.
Anything
I think
else?
we have some more time, but
I don't know how long do we have? Is it done?
I have like 20 minutes, but if there are more questions.
Do you want to show something?
I think we have.
Should we do?
Yeah, I'm Stefan Candea, I'm from Amnesty International. I look after the media for Amnesty for Turkey, and one of the things, it is shocking what's happening in Turkey. It's been described as a death of journalism. There's a climate of fear. People are scared to speak out. 180 news organizations have been shut down since the failed coup. Over 120 journalists have been arrested since the coup. And in fact, a third of all jailed journalists are in Turkey, in Turkish prisons. It's the biggest jail of journalists in the world. It jumped last year, and it will be the same again this year. The situation is shocking, but I want us to cast our minds back to 2013, December, when 3 journalists in Egypt were arrested, and a campaign started in February 2014, Free AJ Staff. Just a very simple technique of people holding up a sign, showing solidarity with their jailed colleagues. And that's what we tried to do last year. We set up Free Turkey Media last year with Amnesty, but also with the CPJ, with Human Rights Watch, with Article 19, with Index on Censorship, with the Cartoon Network International, with RSF, and other Article 19, other organizations. And what we're asking people to do as we build up to World Press Freedom Day again this year, 3rd of May, is to do the same. Take a selfie, grab one of these little things. I'm going to pass them out now because it would be great if we could do a group shot of everyone holding them up. If you think you don't want to be in the photo, or if you think you're going to Turkey quite soon to do a bit of journalism, just hold it in front of your face. Because, yeah, doing this in Turkey, tweeting something, retweeting an article in Turkey can end up landing you in prison. So the situation is very serious. One of the other things we did as well creatively is to ask journalists. There was a journalist called Musa Kart who was jailed for his cartoons. He's been released at the moment, but we asked cartoonists, artists, to send in their cartoons. And so far we've had over 100 of these sent in. I'm going to show them somewhere, display them. We've also got this selfie board as well, so you can take your own selfie here. But if we can all just maybe grab a few of these. And also Twitter, if you look at the hashtag @TurkeyMedia, and then the hashtag Turkey Media, and @Free Turkey Media is the hashtag or the Twitter address. We've been sponsored, we've been given some free adverts by Twitter just yesterday, so hopefully you'll be seeing a bit of us in the coming months. So, does anyone want to grab? There we go. That one.
So I guess we're kind of done. There's no more
Thank
questions.
you very much.
Thank you for coming to listen, and etc.